Hello and welcome to the Putback on Geico Sports Site. I'm Chris Williamson alongside our SNY NBA insider Ian Begley. And Ian, Clint Capella told the Knicks before Game 5 that his team would send them on a vacation. And shockingly to me and probably lots of Knicks fans, they do, winning 103-89. And before we get into the game, how would you put this season in perspective after the way they lost?
You can't call it anything but a success. I know that the ending was not what the Knicks and their fan base wanted. I know they felt that they could really be more competitive in this series, and the Knicks fan wanted them to get to the second round. But if you look at this thing from a big picture perspective, nobody had them getting to the playoffs this year coming into the season. Nobody had them even finishing near 500 coming into this season. So the fact that they were able to do that, I think is a big accomplishment. And as Tom Thibodeau said after the game, you know, this was a building block, a foundation that they're laying. And then the next steps are key, but certainly taking that first step this season was big.
And this is something that they should be proud of, especially because nobody had these expectations for this team. And the Knicks' best player, Julius Randle, never played like it all series. And even though he shot more aggressively in spurts during this game, he played very reckless, turning it over 8 times. How do you think the Knicks should look at his play here when determining his future in the offseason?
Yeah, I think it factors in because it has to factor in because it's about performing in the playoffs. But I think you also have to take into account that this was Julius Randle's first postseason. And you take into account the idea that he's already shown you that he can perform in New York, which is something that is important for people in the Knicks organization when they're looking at, you know, how do we offer a contract to this player? Do we want to bring this player back? So he checks that box. Obviously, you want him to play better in the playoffs, but I think in a big picture sense, this does not change how the Knicks view Julius Randle's future. I think they still want him beyond his current contract. Best case scenario for them, I think, is to do the extension this offseason where you're getting him for 4 years, $100+ million, rather than letting him hit free agency next offseason, but we'll see what they do.
Right, and they still see him as a core piece, you know, to their franchise to hopefully, you know, get to the playoffs and beyond to the finals one day. And now that the season is over, the focus shifts to the offseason. So what are the biggest decisions they have to face to elevate their roster?
This team has a lot of money to spend in the offseason. They could have around $60 million. They have 2 first-round picks, and they have the ability to be in conversation for trades for disgruntled stars if those opportunities present themselves. So they have options to build out this roster. I think the focus immediately would be at point guard. They have all that money. They'll be keeping an eye on all players, all top players that become available either via trade or in that point guard market. So I think that's the top priority for this club as you enter the offseason.
Yeah, that was something that you saw in this series. They had Derrick Rose, but anything beyond that wasn't sustainable. Obviously, Elfrid Payton didn't really do anything well, so that's something that they have to address. Getting another shooter as well will be very important for them to take that next step, as you mentioned, to get beyond the first round of the playoffs.